squash fans, we have some news to share. We actually have two big announcements for Squash Radio. And why is today big? Well, here are the headlines. We are really excited and proud to be launching a new show called The Breakdown. The other big news, we have another sponsor for Squash Radio. Let me give you a little background on both these developments. The new show. So for a while, we've been looking at ways to try and mix up the content we normally do and adding a little variety to our long form interviews. Now we think we have just the solution with a new series called The Breakdown. This is where we focus on current happenings in the squash world, and it's hosted by me, Conor O'Malley, and Bill Buckingham, a former colleague. As Bill masterfully wrote, Bill and Conor didn't agree on much when they worked together, and the time apart show that things haven't really changed that much. We give our views, context, and insights on what's making the news both on and off court. In this episode, we talk burgers and behavior. So we break down what can make a burger destination worthy. We also talk through the debate of showmanship versus sportsmanship, partly sparked by a teenager who is a rising star on the men's professional tour, Moustafa Asal. His recent antics are leaving mixed reviews for squash fans. So take a listen to Bill and myself trying to break it down. Before we jump into our show, I also want to share a quick intro about our new sponsor. They are Baya Sports, and they're on a mission to develop the best court shoe ever. They first focus on squash because the rigors of squash and the beating that it puts on any shoe. Well, if they could solve that problem, that shoe could definitely perform in lots of other sports too. You gotta take these for a test drive yourself. Go to squashradio.com and check out Baya Sports to see their latest Force X. Okay, thanks for listening to that, and let's jump into our show.
What about this?
This call is being recorded.
Welcome to The Breakdown. Here's a little background on my co-host, Bill Buckingham, also known as Buck. So, Bill, tell me the first time that you jumped on a squash court.
Probably year 2000. I was working in New Haven in a sports marketing job and was going to meet with the coaches at Yale, Dave and Mark Talbot, and went up there at their office. And before I left, they had me on the court. I was in a suit, and they had me in a court in my socks hitting with Mark. So I always equate it. I had no idea who Mark Talbot was. I had no idea who Dave Talbot was. I had no idea what squash was, actually. But there I was after a 45-minute meeting in my socks hitting squash balls on the glass court at Yale with Mark Talbot, which, it's kind of like first time you're introduced to baseball, like Derek Jeter having a catch with you, I suppose. So yeah, and at that point, they gave me a pass to the gym, gave me a racket, gave me shoes. I hadn't been to a gym in about 10 years. I was in my 30s. I was probably like 30 to 40 pounds overweight. I think I weighed like 250 at that point. I started playing, hitting there, started showing up there. Dave got me games, Mark got me games. I started playing, and it became kind of a way of life. And stops and starts with injuries and soreness and walking on the court with 19 braces on me because every part of my body hurt, but kept at it. And, 20 years later, still play, work out fanatically all the time, weigh probably 70 pounds less now than I did then. So that's how I got into it. And it's been a solid 20-year journey, for better or worse, for the squash people in the world.
So on your fitness journey, from the moment you first hit your ball to then when you started noticing some like fitness gains in terms of, in this case, weight loss, how long did that take?
Within the first year, for sure. I mean, I didn't drop all that weight right away, obviously, but I also started running, and I started using treadmills and bikes and exercising, doing things to loosen up. So it wasn't go home. And again, nothing else changed. I didn't stop eating. I still eat like a teenager. I didn't stop drinking beer and, just being unhealthy in every other way that I was always unhealthy. I just added an exercise component to it, and squash was it. I was playing 4 times a week, which is a lot of squash. I mean, playing after work 4 times a week for 2 hours a night. So yeah, I'd say within a year for sure, I had dropped 25 pounds, 25, 30 pounds. And continued on and through various injuries and things such as that, and running marathons, running half marathons and things such as that. So squash started me on the exercise train for sure. And I've luckily been able to keep that up for the past 20 years.
Squash has been a really good, I would call it an organizing principle for my health activities, meaning like I do crazy things to both get ready for squash, and when I'm on the court, I push myself harder than I do in other areas. It's a tough sport. And then
afterwards, and I'm trying to get ready for the next session. So
Right. Exactly the case. So yeah, it's I'm terrible at it, but it's still the most enjoyable recreational activity I do. At this point in my life, I play squash, I run, and I play golf. And I'm probably a better squash player than I'm a golfer, and I'm definitely a better squash player than I'm a runner, but I'm equally, I'm also terrible at all of them. So,
and I say this without, because I think you know this about me, I mean what I say. I really enjoy playing squash with you. So
I'm your only win.
Well, yeah, I didn't say why.
Yeah,
I'm just saying I do. So.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's, I'm sure, plenty to get started. So take a listen to Bill and Conor breaking it down.
All right. And, see how it goes. If it doesn't go good, then, we don't put it out, right?
Well, that's on the record. So
we're recording. Awesome.
we're recording. All right. Hey there, squash fans. Welcome back to another episode of The Breakdown with the one and only Bill Buckingham. Welcome to the show.
Connor, happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. How you doing, buddy?
Good.
Good. Holidays good?
Yeah, it's going well, man. It's nice to kind of get a little bit of a break, a little bit of a rest. Although when you're running your own shop, it's kind of like you don't really get one. But I'm excited about this concept of doing the breakdown. And today's topic is showmanship versus sportsmanship.
Yeah. A great topic considering coming off of a black ball and the two tournaments they just ran back to back to end the 2020 PSA season. So looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, I think it's sort of timely. I know this is something we talk about often, and it's just very timely that this is really being highlighted by some players on the tour, and we'll get into that. But before we get into the squash breakdown, I have another breakdown that I want Buck to answer. And that's going to be breaking down the burger.
Wow.
And where I want you to start off with is, because this was one of the few times I've heard from you, is you use the description of a destination burger.
Destination burger, just like anything else that's destination, is someplace that you would actually get in your car and drive to, even, be it an hour, be it 45 minutes, get in a subway somewhere, as opposed to going to your local place down the road where the quality's not quite as good. It's worth the travel to go to.
What is the hierarchy here? So is destination burgers like
the highest?
Then what's below that?
A good neighborhood burger. And again, this conversation is so weird to have in this day and age because there is no destination. So my destination burger is in my kitchen at this point. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, there's destination burgers. There's your good local burger, and then there's every other burger. And then how do you rank if you're going over to someone's house, right? And someone's cooking a burger for you? Never.
They never rank?
Or no, would never. I would never go over to anybody's house for a burger. If I go over to somebody else's house and they're having burgers, I end up cooking them because they know how finicky I am about them. And my neighbors are somewhat fearful of actually serving me a burger for fear that I'll just rip it apart.
Interesting. Well, I would actually take you up on that challenge now. I have...
Dude, you're a vegan.
Well, let's just say that I'm plant-based for time being, but that doesn't mean I've always been plant-based.
It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, by the way, but go ahead.
Thank you. Well, this summer, my dad was, midway through the pandemic and around July-ish, and it was coming up to his birthday. He was like, gosh, I'm really just craving a McDonald's burger, which just left me baffled.
Uh-huh.
But I was like, okay, this man, he wants a burger. I'm going to make him a burger. And so I went up and I started making a smash burger. So it's kind of like think In-N-Out burger or Shake Shack vibe.
Yeah, overrated burger you made him, basically.
Well, it was still, that's what the man asked for. So
what is a smash burger? Is that like, literally smash the patty down and like get all the juices out of it so it doesn't have any flavor, just like Shake Shack does and In-N-Out do?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But it was still very solid because, again, it was homemade, it was fresh, all that stuff. So going back to, because this is how Buck rates burgers. So we got destination at the top. We got your neighborhood burger, solid burger. But then what makes the criteria for rating a burger?
To me, it's the patty, 100% the patty and the meat that it's used. Everything else is superfluous to this argument. The bun is basically just something that you don't get your hands dirty, keep you from getting your hands like greasy. But yeah, it's all about the meat.
Wait, so you don't care about bun quality?
Don't well, put it this way, if it's stale, of course, but I mean, in the end, like, give me a normal grocery store hamburger bun. If I go to a good burger place and they have just like a normal grocery store hamburger bun that comes 8 to a pack for, $1.99 or $3.29 or whatever it costs, that kind of bun, because I don't want the bun to overwhelm the burger. They do these pretzel rolls, they do these Kaiser rolls, they do these, just the most ridiculous things, and all you taste is the roll, or it's so thick. I'm there to eat the burger. If I want bread, I'll make toast.
Well, I recall, and this is when
Hey, by the way, Connor, I'm not saying I'm not flip flopping on this. You may recall certain things that I may have changed my mind. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. 60 years old at this point. I can change my mind if I want.
Well, if nothing else, you're definitely Flexa Bill now.
Exactly, exactly the case.
So you opened my eyes to this whole realm. Truth be told, I thought a burger was just a burger, and you proved me wrong many times in that case. But you also taught me about burger to bun ratio. So you now this no longer matters.
Well, I think I made that clear. And again, you're known for not listening to anything I say, which is fair because I do babble on incoherently quite a bit. But yeah, so I just said that if it's a huge like focaccia roll, that's too much bread, right? I just want a normal bun, like a normal hamburger bun, and nothing that like takes away like from the quality of the meat.
I'm a potato bun guy myself.
And people don't realize this, that we're actually having this conversation and we're looking at each other. And just the fact that you're plant-based right now makes me not take this conversation seriously. I mean, it's a good topic. And I as you know me, I enjoy burgers, but it's hard talking to a plant-based boy about burgers.
Well, again, I'm doing it for now. It's been a good test run, and I don't know what the future may hold.
How long have you been doing it?
October 12th.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's a long period. What did you have for Christmas dinner?
We did we did have chicken. So again, I'm not excluding it. We did chicken. We did
the infamous plant chicken. Yes, I see chicken. Chickens grow in my backyard all the time. It's fair.
I'm majority plant based, which is like, am I gonna like go around it on Christmas Day or force? I don't know. So no.
All right.
We had a very good.
So my flip flopping about burger to bun ratio pales in comparison to your plant based eating chicken.
I don't know if that's quite the same.
All right.
And to just correct you on one thing, he says that I don't listen. In fact, I listen so much to what you say that I'm paying attention that I find that you're the flip flopper.
Oh, 100%.
What was it? Quick to trench in and then quick to retrench.
I don't know. There's some saying like that somebody we know used to say to us all the time.
We got to remember that.
I think it's first to dig in, last to retrench. I don't know. We'll have to Google it.
First to dig in, quick to retrench.
For our 14 listeners, and we do have 14 listeners now because I convinced my sister-in-law to subscribe. So we have 14 during Christmas. So to our 14 listeners, if they could Google that and find out what the saying is and who said it. But yeah, for destination burgers, and before we jump in, I mean, we've probably lost a lot of our 14 squash fans who are listening to this because they didn't want to come on to a Food Network show. Although it is true that I like burgers more than squash. So,
well, along those lines there were some other burger connoisseurs that we met along the way. Who to you ranks as like, if coming from them, you trust them so much that if they say it's a destination burger, and you believe them? Because I think other people you might not totally believe.
Are we talking in the squash world?
Well, who that we might know, yeah.
Well, I trust Harry. I won't give his last name because he's very private, because Harry knows what a destination burger is. Harry, my coworker, knows what a destination burger is. Raheem, my former intern Raheem, who, by the way, shout out to Raheem Logan and his Black Boy Fly, giving it a push right here. He now knows what a burger is. He was my intern for 2 years. And as he'll admit, the only 3 things I taught him in 2 years was how to be on time, how to answer the phone, and how to order a burger. All life lessons, and none of those made his book Black Boy Fly, but it should be the sequel. Black Boy Fly orders his burger medium rare. I think maybe the sequel.
That could be a sequel.
Yeah. So
we got 2. Anyone else fit that criteria?
I feel my memory. I feel there's somebody you want me to say.
No. I'm just, again, there were some other ones. Richard Chin. And
yeah, well, Richard Chin is kind of like you, flip-flopping between plant-based and burgers, even though he's never been plant-based. He knows what a great burger is, but he also thinks that Shake Shack's a great burger. So his credibility is so lacking because he's like a devotee of Shake Shack.
Why can't you appreciate both?
Because one's good and one's not. I mean, Shake Shack's just not good. It's basically expensive McDonald's.
There's another Brian Patterson.
Brian Patterson, he's English though. So, no offense to any English listeners we have out there.
So really, you're saying that there's only two.
Put it this way, Brian didn't care what the burger was like if the beer was that good. That's all you eat. I mean, when we used to go out, he'd go for the destination beer. We'd hop on the train and go up to various places up in Riverdale and things. And I think Brian just cared about the beer and the company, of course.
Fair enough. Well, and I know this is during a pandemic, and fingers crossed that when we do get back to normal, what are going to be some of your destination burgers that you're going to go back out and get?
The number one destination burger in the country, as far as I'm concerned, is a place called Late Tub in Hollywood, Florida. It's like 10 minutes from the Fort Lauderdale airport. Go ahead and Google it. It's won numerous awards. It's right on the Intercoastal. It's a little dive. It's called Late Tub because it's decorated in toilet fixtures, bathtubs, and things such as that. And their burger, to me, has always been the best in the country. So worthy of a trip once this is all over with. More locally, the two ones in the city that I go to the most are McManus, which is on, I believe, like 19th and 7th Ave. It's just a little dive bar in Manhattan, and Molly's over on 22nd and 3rd are probably the ones that I frequent most in New York. And I have to give a shout out to Twins, which is behind our office, just kind of our local bar, and hopefully survives the pandemic. But their burger, while not on the level of those others, the service and the smile that comes with makes it worthwhile. So.
And what about in Connecticut?
There's nothing great. There's a lot of overrated burgers like Louis and things like that, like cool places to go, but the burger itself isn't really that good. Yeah, I mean, there are, but I can't think of one right now that I'm like going to get in my car if I could even and drive to like more than 10 minutes. I'll go to my little local joint down the road and have theirs, which is good enough. Or I'll make one myself.
And knowing that a place gets really good reviews and a lot of hype, will you walk in there giving it a fair chance, or are you looking?
100% fair chance. 100% fair chance. No, I won't give it more than one fair chance. Basically, if it's not good, I'll never go back. Or if I do go back, I won't order the burger again. But yeah, I will definitely give it a fair chance without even thinking about the hype. And believe me, I read about it and I'll say, hey, this place getting, everybody's saying it's the best burger here. And I'll go right there and try it. And sure enough, 95% of the time it disappoints. But, when it hits, it's a home run.
Well, thanks for the first food breakdown. And I have some other topics I'll be bringing up in the future, but appreciate you indulging me.
Yeah, no, I tell you what, obviously, all the pain of the pandemic, there is, you miss some things, and going to sit down at a bar with a cold beer and a hand-caressed burger, it does not get any better than that. And that's something that I probably miss more than anything during this.
I hear you. So the squash breakdown that we're going to go through today, as I mentioned, is showmanship versus sportsmanship. So give us some of the context of how this came up recently in the world of squash.
Yeah, the black ball that happened, they ran 2 back-to-back events, which we didn't really talk about, and it's been a couple of weeks since it's been over. But can you imagine organizers running back-to-back pro tournaments, a women's one, and then that ends, and the next day they start a men's professional tournament, all the planning and the organization goes into one, and they ran 2. Their hair must have been on fire half the time there and ready to pass out afterwards. But so that ran, and during that tournament, the new hot player, as it were, in squash, Moustafa Asal from Egypt, 19-year-old kid, junior world champion, British Junior Open champion, caused the squash world to freak out, the for or against whether he was good for the game or not good for the game based on his actions during that tournament and in previous tournaments also.
Well, spell that out, what that means, because
I think it was twofold. I think there's people who accuse him, and again, dynamic player. He's probably going to be great if he doesn't get hurt. Possible future world number 1, but he has a reputation for being a poor sport on court, and to that, for some people, that means doesn't call his double bounces, doesn't call his doesn't call things that he knows kind of maybe blocks a little bit more on purpose than he should. Just does things on the court that some say is borderline cheating, and that coupled with his celebrations after he wins a point or wins a match causes a lot of squash fans to certainly huge differing opinions on him.
Well, let's first tackle the celebrations, because
Sure.
And I haven't watched this as closely as you have, so this is really at 30,000 feet here. This is where he has now been taking off his shirt and throwing into the crowd, or taking off his shirt and sort of fist pumping into the camera. What else? What are some other ones that have been?
That's pretty much it. The loud roars after the points and after the wins. He does a unique celebration, which I think is an homage to an Egyptian soccer player, I believe, who's fallen ill. I apologize, I don't follow soccer all that closely. And Mo Salah, one of the probably the most famous Egyptian soccer player right now, does it as tribute, where he puts his fingers around his eyes and raises his three fingers up, kind of doing a salute. And not quite exactly sure what it means, but it's more of an homage. So there's that. But I think it was the shirt throwing that really set people on fire, because it's something that squash hadn't seen before. It was also during a pandemic when people were still worried about transmission of how you can transmit COVID, and they're doing all the, they're in a bubble and not allowed to shake hands and not allowed to have the floor swept and all that. And then he's throwing a sweat-soaked shirt out into the stands.
That pandemic concern to me felt secondary than the first one of like just breaking sort of a norm. And,
Sure.
I'll give my quick impression, because I was like, I saw it happen and I didn't understand why this was a big deal. So I thought, look, this is professional sports. A lot of other athletes are doing this in other sports. I don't understand the controversy.
Agreed. I don't understand the controversy either. I mean, you see it in every sport, and he's a young kid. He probably consumes media like most young kids do. He sees celebrations, soccer celebrations. He sees football celebrations. Every sport, these guys have celebrations, and it's a way to a lot of these players market themselves.
Yeah.
It seems like he's a pretty bright kid, and he's probably thinking, you know what, this is where I could separate myself from the rest of the players. And so I was reading on, the different platforms that the video of it had like 50,000 views when most of the videos have like 5,000 views.
Yeah.
So it made the rounds for sure. So to me, he's being smart about it. I mean, people may hate it, people may like it, but I think it's a bit calculated on his end, which is fine.
I think that's well done on his end. And by the way, it's good for the sport in general. I mean, anything that we can do that brings in fans, I say, let's do it. I do think that there is a point that this might go too far. And where was this in football? Where like the touchdown dances or something was going on, or
Yeah, I mean, the guy early in the season who pantomimed that he was urinating on the field as part of his celebration and got a 15-yard penalty, and it got assessed on the kickoff, and the other team drove down and kicked a field goal to win the game. When it comes to that's where it's hurting your team. That's a little different story. In the end, if he's successful, that's the whole thing. Is he's successful? You could celebrate like that all you want. You don't become a very successful player, nobody's going to care in the end, right? Like at the end of the day, no one is going to care. But if he becomes, number one in the world, then it'd be people will love it. And people will be like, hey, this is part of what makes him the number one player in the world. And not to, as I do date myself, in the day, there was like Billy White Shoes Johnson was a famous punt returner and kickoff returner for the Houston Oilers. And he was a great player, but he was more well known for his celebration, his dances, and the Icky Shuffle, and, Icky Woods and the Icky Shuffle. They're more known for that than they were known for their play. So the question is, what do you want to be known more for? Do you want to be known more for how good you were, or for how you celebrated a touchdown or celebrated a win? So there has to be a balance. But to me, I think it's great. And just the fact that we're talking about it, to me, it's a positive.
So I guess to also clarify my point was what he did, I didn't see as a big deal. I do think that there are instances where it can go over the line. And it's hard to say right now what that line is because it's not done so much. I think.
Give me an example.
Well, I'm just talking about within football or that kind of stuff where.
Yeah.
So I can think celebrations can go. It's not to say you have a carte blanche, you can go do whatever you want. I think that so far what's been demonstrated is not raising an eyebrow, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we're numb to it at this point. I think it was shocking 10 years ago. And now every play, you watch a football game, now literally every play, someone has half a sack where his arm touches the quarterback and helps a sack. He goes and does a pose and goes in for the camera, does a big celebration. But I'm kind of numb to it. So I think in squash, we weren't numb to it. You didn't see it that often. And it's typically you win the match, maybe a fist pump, maybe a roar, maybe a yalla, as they say in Egypt. But for the most part, shake the hand, walked off the court. So when he took his shirt off, screamed, threw his shirt into the crowd, it definitely stirred some people's emotions.
Well, this sort of segues into the other half of this thing where, so to me, that's showmanship. And I think.
Well, by the way, before we segue into that, another question is like why the vitriol aimed at him as opposed to maybe a Greg Gaultier, who had some of the most craziest celebrations you've ever wanted to see on court. And when he did it, it was Greg Gaultier, the veteran, the general, the French general, showing his emotions and stuff. But I can't thinking Asal throwing his shirt out was any worse than Gaultier, like in 216 when he beat Rosner at the TOC, doing his splits and his spins, and which was kind of weird. You know, it wasn't really emotional. It was almost like it was a choreographed dance. And the venom wasn't aimed at him, was paled in comparison to what Asal got after throwing the shirt. So you wonder if there's also a little bit of anti-Egyptian sentiment on tour because they're the evil empire of squash, as it were, for better or worse. They're the best. And just like people take aim at the Yankees and the New England Patriots and things like that, I think people tend to blow things up when it's somebody or something is so dominant in a sport. And I think that might have led a little bit, in my opinion, to overreaction to his celebration.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
I mean, we saw it when, you know, in the United States with Trinity. When Trinity College was on their dominant run, the anti-Trinity sentiment in some of those matches, if you were there, was incredible. And it was all because they were the best. And, you know, there were probably some underlying things that people talk about with racism and whatnot. But in the end, it was because they were the best. So everybody disliked them. And it's just the way it is.
That's a good reminder, a good point, where I still think where showmanship and sportsmanship intersect is like, look, you've got to give credit to the other person on the court and go shake their hand first. You know, you can do a quick celebration, shake the hand, allow that to come off. And with regard to the Trinity, there was a year where they all rushed versus letting the losing player and the losing team kind of leave the court first or celebrate. So I do think that that's going to where I said that there isn't a carte blanche with showmanship just because I think it's good for the game. I still think there needs to be sportsmanship, keep that at a high point, which goes into now we're talking about how while you're playing and competing, where is that line between sportsmanship and showmanship?
Yeah, it's a great question. And after a lot of the criticism, and people couch the criticism of Asal's celebrations with, well, it's not just a celebration, it's that he doesn't call his double bounces. Well, there was a tin here that he didn't call. So they are accusing him of cheating. So that's where the question lies. Is it cheating when you're a professional athlete, your match is being refereed and your game is being refereed and you are just playing? And is it up to you to call that stuff on yourself? I suppose in squash it is, because it's always been that way. But, you know, compared to other sports, these guys are playing for a living, basically. I mean, you don't think like Michael Jordan did everything, cheated? He cheated. I mean, they all do. They get every edge, they hook, they push, they flop, they do whatever they need to do to win. And they get credit for that. In every sport, there's that kind of not blatant cheating, but any kind of flopping is cheating, and trying to get the ref to call something that's not there. That's cheating, no? And yet that's kind of celebrated in other sports as, hey, these guys are doing this for a living and they're doing everything they can to get an edge to win.
I don't know if I would say it's celebrated. I think there's an element of respect or potentially given to it. But within our sport, these are different conversations that haven't been happening yet. So the nice part is, even within our sport, we're more like other sports than we may think.
Yeah. And it's a fine line in, because our sport prides itself on sportsmanship and calling your double bounces. But you know what? The sport's being refereed. So isn't it the referee's job to double bounce? And they do have replay and they can make the call there. So is it really, if Moustafa Asal or whomever it is thinks they got the ball, but should he call a double bounce on himself? Because it may not be a double bounce.
Let's say we snap our fingers, you're in charge of the Pro Tour, and whose responsibility is it?
I'd say it's the referees in the video. The referee needs to call for a video referee, and I don't think it's the player's responsibility. I mean, he's playing for a living, and again.
So where does that line come in then? So there's other examples, and I think this was David Palmer and Jonathan Power, that it was just a very aggressive move. And, Jonathan Power was also, during his time, very much called the McEnroe of squash, right? And David Palmer ends up throwing him into the glass very aggressively. So where is the line between of going too far and what's acceptable? Who should call what? And when do players' accountability come into play?
It's a great question. And again, my opinion is that these matches are refereed. So the referee could take control of the match. The referee needs to have control of the match and needs to make the proper call so it doesn't get out of hand. If it does get out of hand, he calls the proper conducts that he needs to do to get it back in hand. Again, I keep hearkening back to, I feel that Asal's being attacked. He's 19, so people do give the excuse of, hey, he's just a kid and da-da-da, which it's not really a good excuse if you're going to accuse him of cheating, because you shouldn't cheat when you're a kid either. So it's always been a weird thing to people to say, oh, he's young, he'll learn. But, well, you shouldn't cheat anyways. But I mean, again, not to harp on Gaultier. So let's talk about Gaultier in the, I think it was 2017 at the TOC, when he was up 2-0 to Showbagi in the semi, and Showbagi the double bounce, and it was a call. I think John Mazzarella had to go to the video referee, and they called it no double bounce. Showbagi ended up winning the game, so then it was 2-1. And then when it's 2-2, Gaultier, basically fakes an injury and gets off court and comes, when the match is just about to slip away, looks like he's going to default the match. Showbagi's standing over him, ready to shake his hand, and, he's going to default by injury, walks off the court, then comes back and plays out of his mind like he was never injured. And even the announcers were calling it a con. Is that cheating? Is that bad sportsmanship? I mean, where do you draw the line with something like that? And
there's an element that we're sort of potentially introducing of gamesmanship.
Right. Great. So maybe the segment should not be called showmanship versus sportsmanship. It should be gamesmanship versus sportsmanship.
Well, I like the alliteration.
No, that's fair. It's fair.
We can put it in brackets, maybe.
That's true. That is true. I mean, yeah. I mean, so
that is not the first time either where sort of gamesmanship has come in. I've seen this. I think it was Nick Matthew versus Ramy Ashour in the U.S. Open one year. Most recently at the TOC, I saw that Tariq Momin versus Mohamed El Showbagi, same kind of thing, where was able to really help when he was losing. They all relied on different aspects of the game that were sort of within the rules, but to gain a certain advantage.
Right.
And that there's an element there of where, look, the other player is still within the rules. Otherwise, the referee wouldn't have allowed it. And the other player who it didn't benefit didn't have the mental capacity to come back and reset as well, right? Like they were close to winning, and that's what they were focusing on, in my opinion.
Right. No, fair enough. No, it's a tough call. I mean, again, I'm looking at it as they're professionals. I wouldn't condone this for any college player, any junior player. You need to call your own double bounces. You need to play by the rules. But these people are playing for a living. So I think that makes a difference.
So question there, though, if you're saying that there's a professional referee, does that take it out? Like you said, for college and juniors, why do they get a pass if you have a professional referee there?
Because they're not playing for their lives. They're not playing for a living. It's not what they're doing to put food on the table and to put money in their bank accounts. They're playing a sport for fun and for their enjoyment and for the other people's enjoyment. I mean, you could take somebody like Asal, who as a junior, his goal was obviously probably always to be a pro player, but he's playing against kids whose goal that's not. It's kids who want to be out there playing because they enjoy the sport and for exercise or just enjoying the game. They shouldn't be subject to that because that's not their goal. Once you get to the professional level, things change. I mean, it's in every sport. Things change once you get to the professional level. So again, it's a very fine line between cheating and gamesmanship. And I don't have the answer, but again, if you look at every other sport, I mean, Derek Jeter, the paragon of sportsmanship, and everybody thought he was like what you looked up to as an athlete. I'll never forget a game maybe right before, like the year before his career ended. He got hit by a pitch and the winning run came in because he got hit by a pitch. And he didn't get hit by a pitch, and he knew he didn't get hit by a pitch, yet he took first base. And the replay was inconclusive, and the umpire had called him hit by a pitch, so they gave to him, but he knew it. And I mean, is that cheating? I mean, Derek Jeter. I mean, he's Derek Jeter, for God's sake. And he took first base and the winning run scored, and he did not get hit by a pitch, and he knew it.
What's your call on that?
It's hard. I mean, I'm not a pro athlete.
You're a diehard Yankees fan.
Well, obviously, obviously.
So let's separate the Yankee fan from the baseball commissioner here.
It's what the call is, right? I mean, the umpires make the call. That's why there's people put in those positions, and that was the umpire's call. So it's the rub of the game, as they call it. It's what happens. So you can't change it. It's going to happen in every sport.
Well, and if we're looking towards other sports where when any rule or any aspect of the game sort of gets abused or taken too much advantage of, there does seem to be a course correction there, right? So in soccer, though, with the flopping, essentially, there are ramifications on the person that flops as well.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me this, and you were a squash pro, you gave lessons to people. I mean, do you think that like these players are taught to block, taught to come off the ball a little bit slowly, just like imperceptibly, just to gain that little bit of an advantage?
It's a good question. Yes, I was coached. To be fair, I was really good at no one having played the sport, like their first ball to like, I would say mid-level. I wasn't great at developing elite athletes. I could relate, I could understand, but there are way better coaches out there who really know how to develop talent. So I didn't do that. What I do think is whether it's overt or subvert, you kind of watch for how do you get the edge? And I mean, it's there in the sport clearly where someone strikes the ball and maintains their position.
Mhm.
And so just even that edge of going around that player a little bit more makes it much more challenging to get that ball, let alone the subsequent balls. So
Right, right.
I don't know if it is coached. I would assume maybe, but I don't know.
Interesting with and getting back to Asal is he doesn't seem to act the same way when he plays other Egyptians on the court. He gets crushed by Farag the last couple of times they played and shows none of the same emotion and none of the same type of play that he does against other players. And when he basically, the only people he seems to lose to now are other Egyptians. I mean, be it in early rounds or later rounds, he doesn't lose too often to people who aren't Egyptians. He just doesn't seem to have that kind of spirit, as it were, on court, or doesn't seem to play with the same emotion on court against other Egyptians. And I wonder whether it's because he's young and he respects these guys and doesn't have the respect for the other players, what makes him not act accordingly when he plays a Paul Call as he does when he plays an Ali Farag.
I think it's two parts. One is definitely maturity or number of years on the tour is a driving factor. But then also number two is playing against your other countrymen is very challenging. The same thing happened with Linku and Gautier. There was Rami Ashur and Amish Shabana. Like these people who are, at such a young age that you look up to, it is a head game at that point.
Right.
Despite the talent capacity, it's still there.
Right.
I mean, the zone for peak performance in squash is really 26 to 32 is peak performance zone. Like it's anyone that is able to achieve, and I should clarify, on the men's side at least.
Right.
On the women's side, we've seen it skew earlier because the talent can really overrun it. But this is for men, this is the peak zone.
Yeah, that's their time to shine. Yeah, it's, I mean, we don't have the answers. It's an interesting discussion. And to put a kind of a wrapper on this, is it good or bad for squash, I think is what we want to decide. And if you look on the message boards, on Reddit, on Facebook groups like Squash Stories and things such as that, it's all over the map. A lot of these message boards that I'm on, and I like a lot of the Facebook groups are European based. And so you do see a lot of anti-Egyptian sentiment on there. So
are you saying
it seems
you're reading into the context of it? Or
that's what we do, right? Read into the context, of course. It just seems like there's more of that than it is fact-based, but it's all over the map. There are people who love it, who like, hey, he's great for the sport. And if people are going to watch and if people are going to view it on YouTube and view on internet and it gets 50,000 views, that's great for the sport. And then there's other people who are like, no, this is not how squash is played and it should never devolve into that. And it's interesting how the argument goes. The two sides of the argument are pretty strong. Again, he's a 19-year-old kid, so he's not. People are taking like he's carrying the future of the sport on his back, which he's really. I mean, he's really not.
I mean, I saw this. There's been a few times you see a player play, and they're going to be world number one, and I think he will be. He will definitely get world championship. I think because that you can pull it together for an event. Being number one, especially in squash, you have to be finals and semifinals like all the time.
Right. Do you think that someone like him could like negatively affect the sport? So the whole argument you read on some of these message boards is that actions like that will stop the sport from growing.
No.
Of course not, right?
Not at all. I mean, even let's look at football, which takes it to the extreme of concussions. And it certainly has had an impact on future growth. But it's still, the football is doing ostensibly really well still.
Right. And to ask the question another way, well, does it help grow the sport? How Asal and like people talking about him, does that grow the sport? Are we in an echo chamber? It's basically just squash fans talking about it and it'll never get beyond that.
That's a tough question. I think the opportunity for it to grow becomes that if anyone becomes aware of it, so increased exposure and or awareness, we're reaching people that we haven't reached before. But I will say, I think that we as a sport focus a lot on getting new players. And I also want to change the conversation is we need more fans. So just even you as a baseball fan, Yankees fan, how many people are diehard Yankees fans that have never played baseball themselves?
Well, I'd say more for football than anything, right? I mean, almost all American kids, like I would say all, but a lot of Americans growing up played some form of baseball, whether it was organized or not, whether it was in the backyard or that type of thing, or little league. Football is one of those sports where it's so popular. And I would say few people in the United States have ever played football. I was having a conversation with my brother, text conversation, watching football just yesterday and all the holding calls that were going on. And I was like, Do you think football would change dramatically if they allowed offensive holding, which is like a call that happens all the time in football, and calls plays back? And he's like, well, of course it would. And I said, well, how do you know that? Like, we never played football. Like, somebody who plays football would have to answer that question, whether that's something that defenses could then overcome and they could get rid of that as a penalty because it's so annoying and just ruins games from a fan's point of view. But yeah, football is the same way. Nobody's been in a huddle at any kind of level for the most part, like 1% of the country. But football is so popular.
Yeah. So I think in just drawing a delineation between growing new players and fans, I think this gives us an opportunity to grow new fans because people get into people who are passionate. And that's where I definitely see Asal as expressing his passion for winning and the sport. And heck, he's playing fantastic.
And for better or worse, it's good for the sport, but it'll only be good if he stays on this trajectory and plays well, right? Because otherwise you end up like a Kyrgios. Is that how you pronounce the tennis player's name? Nick Kyrgios, the player who's like basically does the same thing, has the wild celebrations, yells at the ref, and is like really polarizing in the world of tennis. But people watch him, but again, he's kind of stuck and never wins a Grand Slam, never makes it to the semis of a Grand. He just loses. So basically, he's just thought of the guy who celebrates and the guy who yells at the refs, and as opposed to like McEnroe, who like was one of the all-time greats. So I think unless Asal continues his ascent up the rankings, all of it will be a moot point in the end. He'll just be another kid who couldn't control his temper. So let's hope he goes onward and upward. And if for some reason he can bring the game to a more international level where people see it outside us squash fans, you couldn't argue then that it would be good for the sport.
I was going to give you a little while back, heading towards the last word about this topic. I feel like that was a pretty good last word there for you. Do you have anything else you want to?
I have 1,000 things I want to add, but I figured we'd probably stop it here because we're getting into the 45-minute range, so that's a good time to end it. But yeah, 100%. No, I think it's interesting to hear. And again, be interesting to hear from people, squashradio@gmail.com, their thoughts on it, because it's polarizing for sure. And it's one of those things, and especially in our sport, which sportsmanship is one of the foundations. Pro squash, if you want pro squash to grow, again, hammer the point in the ground. Say what you will about other sports that are more popular. Bad sportsmanship, there's borderline cheating, there's people doing everything they can to get an edge to improve their performance, and those sports haven't suffered because of it.
For my last word, I think this definitely puts me as a fan of the sport, puts me in conflict zone because I do uphold sportsmanship a lot, and I have no problems with showmanship, as I said, as long as it doesn't come at a cost of sportsmanship. But I have to say, I do. Gosh, this kind of pains me, but I think there's an element that you're saying where it is correct. The burden of this fall more back on the officials and the referees. And if they're under-equipped, then let's get new equipment.
Well said. I feel you might have written that down ahead of time, Connor.
No.
Okay. All right.
I will say I've given it a lot of thought, though. So,
and the last word on this will be the last word on this, is the bigger issue of the problem with this is how junior players look at these players and see that and think it's okay. And again, to differentiate between a professional athlete playing for his livelihood and a junior squash player, I think that's where the bigger issue is. A young kid sees that and thinks that it's okay to do it when he's playing his under 15 match. He thinks it's okay to celebrate like that. He thinks it's okay to block, to not call his double bounces and things like that when you have a non-professional refs, or it's basically not a professional match. So that's the bigger issue. I think that's the one overwhelming thing that's wrong with what he's doing is the kids who are watching it.
Yeah, but that's true in all sports, right?
100% the case. 100% the case. So,
well, this is great. I like this as a breakdown. So thanks for breaking it down for us.
Yeah, I think we covered every opinion. We were pro, we were con, I think I changed my mind like 7 times during the discussion. It was awesome.
Do we say what our next topic is going to be, or do we let this incubate that we go back and forth on it offline a little bit more?
I would say, since we don't know what our next topic is going to be, we don't tell anyone. How's that?
Well, we also have a few different ones that we've talked about, so we could share that.
No, let's hold off on that. I mean,
okay,
we'll pick the next one, and hopefully the PSA. Obviously, pro squash drives a lot of this conversation, and in the upcoming year, there's not a lot on the pro squash schedule right now for the big events. So hoping there will be, because as much as these conversations about sportsmanship and showmanship and these other things, it's also really nice to talk about the actual play on tour, and with the retirements of the top women players and Rosner retiring on the men's side. There's a lot to talk about on the PSA tour, and sometimes it's nice just to actually talk about the players and the play. And for good or bad, there's not a lot of squash media out there. There's sites and things such as that, and fan sites like Squash Site and things like that. But there's no beat writers in squash who follow the tour around and write critical pieces of the players, and you don't really get to really know. So like the Asal conversation we're having, we're kind of just going off what we read and what we see from afar, because there's nobody really there on site like a beat writer would be for the Yankees or for the Giants or for any other sports, getting the player's opinion on things like this and, really digging down and getting what the real truth is. So it'd be nice to start talking about the tour itself and the players. And hopefully as the pandemic subsides, the vaccines that we'll start to see more play, more tournaments opening up, and we'll have those kind of discussions.
Well, there's definitely a changing of the guards going on within the ranks of the Pro Tour, both on the men's side and the women's side. And this has happened, every 10 years. I think that there is this kind of slew of retirements that really impact and change the game. So I do think we're going to discuss that at a later date. So we'll leave that as a cliffhanger there. But as Bill said, reach out to squashradio@gmail.com. That's squashradio@gmail.com. Let us know any of your thoughts. We're also on all the social media, and you may even get Bill to engage with you in a conversation. What's your preferred platform?
Twitter.
You're in Twitter?
Yeah. I'm almost at the point where I have more followers than I'm following. So I think it's like I'm following like 310 people, and I've got like 302 followers. So
wow.
Yeah, huge,
right.
Huge, huh?
Well done.
Influence. Some may say that I'm an influencer.
Some might say.
All right, Connor, I think we've exhausted this.
All right, Bill. Thanks so much for your time.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for joining us on Squash Radio. We hope you enjoyed this latest episode. But before you leave, we just have one quick last message. As you know, Squash Radio wants to help tell some of the best stories from Squash World. But in order to do that, we want and welcome your help. Do you know a person or a story that involves squash that is interesting, funny, moved you care about, reflects your passion for the sport? Well, share it with us, and let's try and get it out there on the air. You can email me at squashradio@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media. Again, thanks for your time, and, well, until next time, be well and have fun.